Hello everybody and welcome back to the Dovetail box series. We are there, it's time to apply the finish. Let's get going. So once again, this is going to be one of those countless episodes where it's completely up to you what you do. There is no wrong answers at this point, it's down to your personal preference. And you know, this video is pretty much going to be me documenting what I'm finishing the box in and how I would go about it. I am choosing OSMO Raw for this, which has a white pigment in it, which cancels out any yellowing created by the finish. As a result, this box should stay somewhat a similar color after applying the finish. However, it will have a slightly glossier sheen on it, let's say. I would prefer that on poplar as opposed to using something like oil, in this instance tung oil, but it will be the same if I was to use boiled linseed or walnut oil, finishing oil, anything like that. Stuff like this will cause the timber to yellow somewhat, which looks good on things like ash, oak, basically timbers where you want them to go that kind of golden-y yellow colour. Same goes for OSMO. I use OSMO quite a lot on my projects. This is the clear satin, and despite being clear, it does have a sort of yellowy sort of tint to it, so it will discolour the timber. Whatever finish you go for, I would recommend just watching the video and just take note of how I would go about finishing the box. So I've already dusted down all the surfaces to make sure that there's no standing dust on this that's going to clog up the finish. That also includes getting inside the box, down into those bottom corners and making sure there is no dust gathering in there whatsoever. A dusting brush is a very nice way to do that, but if you have a air compressor and air gun, just blast that in there. Make sure you got your mask on, obviously. You could also use a tack cloth for this or something. Just make sure that there's no standing dust on this that's going to clog up the finish. I'm also going to put a soft base under it as well, because I'm going to be flipping this all over the place and I don't want the hard workbench to start scratching the surface. So I'm going to finish this in much the same way I went about sanding it, which was from the bottom of the box up. For the lid, because this is likely to be seen on both sides and is going to be interacted with quite a bit, we're going to do 2 coats on both sides and we will just focus on them one at a time. Okay, so we'll give it a quick stir to begin with. You can see how white this is to begin with, but don't worry, when you put it on, it doesn't literally paint your piece white. The white pigment in it simply cancels out the yellowing caused by the liquid on the timber, I guess. Double check there's no dust on there, and then we'll go for our first layer. So with OSMO, I have already done a video on how to apply OSMO correctly, so I won't dwell on it too much, but there is a link to that in the description below. Essentially, the key to this stuff is spreading it very, very thin in multiple layers. If you allow it to clump up and dry, then it's just going to go sticky. And what I have just realised is that I can actually use these 2 areas as a prop to allow airflow to get inside the box while it is drying, which means that I can actually do this top edge, the insides, and basically everything except those top edges and leave it to dry like that. What a brilliant design this is. Look at that. So now I'm just wiping off all the excess OSMO to make sure that there's no pools or anything like that, and making sure that this first layer is really, really thin. Okay, so there we go. That is the first coat of OSMO sorted. I've done the underside of the lid and the entirety of the box, basically, minus those 2 upper edges that the box is now resting on and allowing airflow to get within the box and all around it and everything like that as well. Now, one thing I would like to say now is regarding oily rags. Once you're finished with them, do not bunch them up and chuck it in the bin, especially if that bin is filled with shavings and wood and dust and all that, because oily rags have the potential to spontaneously combust. Now, I will admit I'm not sure on the details of this. I don't know why it happens. I don't know if it's more likely to happen with some finishes compared to others, but don't tempt fate with it. Do not bunch this up and chuck it in the bin. In fact, don't bunch it up and leave it anywhere. Unwrap it and lay it out flat so that it can dry out properly, and then you can dispose of it. I don't want to tempt fate with any of this. I unravel it and put it flat outside the workshop, so there is no risk of anything happening. But as I say, it's just something that I've been told, and I will admit that I question the validity of, but you know, it's not worth risking. Lay it out flat and let it dry properly. So we'll wait for this coat to dry, and then I will see you when it's ready to apply the second one. All right, so a couple of days later and that first coat has dried, and at this point for the second and third coats, just feel all over the box and see if you can find any spots that are a little bit rough and just need cutting back slightly. If you spread the Osmo nice and thin, then this shouldn't be an issue, but, he says, while just finding some, if it is an issue, some fine wire wool, this is 4-aught, just give it a light scrub with that, hardly any pressure at all, and that will get rid of those small rough points, and then we can just go over that with another coat later on. You could also do this with probably 240 sandpaper, very lightly, and that will get rid of any of those little areas that feel slightly rough. And make sure to give it a quick brush down just to make sure you got no steel wool particles that are going to be embedded in the finish. Obviously don't be wanting that. Now, I have already done a second coat by this point. I actually did the entire box with the base, the inside, the top. Everything now has a second coat on it, apart from the top of the lid, obviously, because I didn't do that during the first layer, as I wanted to rest it on that while this top surface dried. So this now has 2 on the base, 2 all over the box. I'm now going to do a third layer, and I'm going to leave the bottom as it is, meaning I'm just going to do the top of it and the rest of the box, meaning this has 3 layers, the top of the lid has 3 layers, the inside only has 2. That should be more than enough for most finishes, to be honest, if you're just working with general oils. With Osmo, 3 coats is more than enough, but 2 would definitely suffice. All right, that is the third coat complete. So if you want to know a little bit more about my process with applying Osmo, whether it's Osmo Raw or Osmo Clear or Osmo Exterior, whatever, I've done a dedicated video on that, which will really help you out with the whole process. As that's the third coat, that is pretty much it for this project. However, I'm not going to show you the finished box until the summary video, which we've got coming up after this, where we're going to do a breakdown of the entire project, what you learned throughout, and put it all in one video to wrap up your learning experience. So you can view that video by clicking the link below, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, please like the video, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.